On a map, China looks unstoppable. It has 1.4 billion people. It has the world's largest navy. It builds cities faster than New York builds a single subway station. When you see the factories and the missiles, the message is clear. The East is rising, the West is declining, and the math is inevitable. But today, I want you to ignore the map. I want you to look at the efficiency, because if you open the books, the Red Dragon isn't just losing, it is being humiliated by a single strip of land on the American coast. The state of California, home to surfers and hippies, has a GDP of $3.9 trillion. China, with all its might, sits at $18 trillion. That sounds like China is winning, until you realise China needs 1.4 billion people to get that number. California does it with just 39 million. It means that pound for pound, one single Californian generates the same economic value as 35 Chinese citizens. So here is the mystery we need to solve today. How does a civilization that makes everything from your iPhone to your shoes fail to beat the efficiency of a state that mostly makes software and movies? The answer isn't communism. The answer is a specific economic virus that started in 1433, and we are going to trace it right now. The answer lies in the story of one man, Hui Ka-yan. 5 years ago, Hui Ka-yan was the face of the China miracle. He was the founder of Evergrande, the richest man in Asia, and he wore a gold Hermes belt to political rallies. He represented the unstoppable rise. Today, Hui Ka-yan is a prisoner. His company is a $300 billion crater of debt, and the thousands of towers he built are standing empty, rotting in the rain. Hui Ka-yan's story reveals what the news won't tell you. China isn't a superpower. It is a Ponzi scheme disguised as a superpower. The miracle was always fake because it was built on volume, not value. And today, we are going to trace this fatal flaw back to its source. Forget Mao Zedong in 1949. This goes back to 1433. We're tracking a bureaucratic virus that made an emperor burn his own navy. The same virus that guarantees China will never truly fly. To understand why China in 2026 cannot fix its economy, you have to understand the operating system that it is running on, and that system was installed exactly 600 years ago. The year is 1405, decades before Christopher Columbus even thought about getting on a boat. China was already the master of the oceans. They had a man named Admiral Zheng He. Zheng He wasn't just an explorer, he was a projection of absolute power. He commanded the treasure fleet, an armada of over 300 ships. Some of these vessels were 400 feet long, carrying thousands of sailors, giraffes from Africa, and gold from India. Compare that to Columbus, whose flagship, the Santa Maria, was a pathetic 85 feet long. In 1405, China had the technology, the money, and the manpower to colonize the world. They could have discovered America. They could have controlled the trade routes of Europe. They could have been the British Empire 4 centuries early. But they didn't. In 1433, the emperor made a decision that still haunts the country today. He looked at the merchant class, the people getting rich from all this trade, and he got scared. He realized that wealthy merchants are hard to control. They have their own power, and they have their own ideas. So the emperor stopped the voyages and burned the fleet. He destroyed the blueprints. He made it a capital crime to build a ship with more than 2 masts. China chose control over growth. They chose to be the king of a walled garden rather than a competitor in an open ocean. Now you might say that's ancient history. That has nothing to do with electric vehicles or AI. But it has everything to do with it, because in October 2020, the Communist Party did the exact same thing. They burned the fleet again, but this time, the admiral wasn't named Zheng He, his name was Jack Ma. If you were watching the news in the 2000s, Jack Ma was the face of the new China. He was a former English teacher who built Alibaba, an e-commerce giant that rivaled Amazon. He was charismatic, he was innovative, he was proof that China could do more than just assemble plastic toys. They could invent the future. Then, on October 24th, 2020, Jack Ma made a mistake. He went to the Bund Summit in Shanghai and he stood on a stage in front of the most powerful bankers and regulators in the country. And he told the truth. He criticized the Chinese state-owned banks. He compared them to pawn shops that only lend to people who don't need money. He said the regulators were stifling innovation. It was a moment of pure Californian-style free speech, and the reaction was swift. 2 days later, Jack Ma was summoned by regulators. The massive IPO of his financial company, Ant Group, which was set to be the biggest in history, was cancelled overnight, and Jack Ma simply disappeared. The most famous man in China vanished from public view for 3 months. When he finally resurfaced, he was a different man, quieter, broke. Why would a country desperate for economic growth destroy its most successful entrepreneur and wipe out $300 billion in value overnight? The answer is found in the book Red Capitalism by Carl Walter. He explained that in China, the banks are not businesses, they are the party's wallet. They exist to fund the government's political projects. The bridges to nowhere, the high-speed trains that lose money, the massive stadiums. Jack Ma's company was using technology to lend money more efficiently than the state banks. He wasn't just a competitor, he was an existential threat to the party's control over money. So, just like the emperor in 1433, Xi Jinping struck a match. He burned the modern treasure fleet to save the bureaucracy. This is the crime scene, the moment the superpower dream died, because you cannot have a Silicon Valley if you arrest your Steve Jobs every time he speaks his mind. The rot goes deeper than just one man. If you look closely at the factories that Jack Ma left behind, you find an even darker secret. We call China the factory of the world, but the research shows that title is a lie. There is a label that is printed on almost every object in your house, made in China. That label is the psychological anchor of China's power. It convinces us that they are the engine room of the global economy. If they stop, the world stops. But if you pick up your iPhone and look closer, you will see a phrase that is much more accurate. Designed in California, assembled in China. In his book Unmade in China, author Jeremy Haft exposes a humiliating reality that the Chinese Communist Party tries to hide. He argues that China is not the factory of the world, it is the assembly bench of the world. Take the phone in your pocket and run a forensic audit. The screen, it's likely made by Samsung in South Korea. The glass, that's Corning, an American company. The camera sensors, that's Sony from Japan. The microchip, which is the brain of the device, that comes from Taiwan or designs from the US. So what does China actually do? They snap the pieces together. They do the low-skill, low-wage, high-pollution work of assembly, and the economics of this are brutal. On a standard smartphone that sells for $1,000, China captures roughly $10 to $20 of value. China gets the dirty air, the exhausted workers, and $10. California gets the intellectual property, the brand value, and the $400 profit margin. Haft describes this as the Lilliputian effect. From a distance, China looks like a giant because of the sheer volume of goods leaving its ports. But up close, it is thousands of tiny, low-value companies standing on each other's shoulders, desperately competing for pennies, while the real wealth flows back to the West. So, this creates a mathematical problem. If China is making pennies on manufacturing, how on earth did they report a GDP of $18 trillion? Where is all that wealth coming from? The answer is the second part of the lie. They stopped building products and they started pouring concrete. If you drive 2 hours outside of almost any major Chinese city, you'll hit forests of empty high-rises, 30, 40 stories, completed, painted, landscaped, and completely empty. We call them ghost cities, but they are not mistakes. They are the engine of the economy. According to a report by the Daily Economy, China has now built over 600 million permanent buildings. They have constructed enough square footage to house the entire population of the Earth, yet tens of millions of these apartments will never have a light turned on inside them. Why? Because in China, construction is not about supply and demand, it is about hitting a target. Local officials are promoted based on GDP growth. The fastest way to fake growth is to borrow money from a state bank and build a skyscraper. It doesn't matter if nobody buys it. It doesn't matter if it sits rotting in the rain. The moment the concrete is poured, it counts as GDP. Economist Thomas Orlick, in his book China, The Bubble That Never Pops, calls this a zombie economy. He explains that in a normal country, these developers would go bankrupt. The bubble would pop. But in China, the government forbids the bubble to pop. They keep lending more money to the zombies to keep them walking, and the cost of this denial is staggering. Goldman Sachs recently estimated the total value of unsold Chinese housing inventory and unfinished projects at $13 trillion. Let's put that number in perspective. $13 trillion is more than the GDP of Germany, Japan, and India combined. It is 10 times the size of the entire Mexican economy. It is $13 trillion of wealth that is actually just piles of bricks earning zero return. This isn't a slowdown, it's a kinetic failure. They have traded their future for concrete, and the worst part is, there is nobody left to live in these houses even if they were finished. Because while they were busy building empty nurseries, they forgot to have children. The real tragedy of the ghost city is there's nobody coming to fill them. If you walk the streets of Beijing today, you will encounter a phenomenon that terrifies the Communist Party more than any American aircraft carrier. It is called Tangping, or lying flat. Meet Han. He is 25 years old. He has a university degree, he is smart, but instead of working 996, that's 9 AM to 9 PM 6 days a week, to build the Chinese dream, he has quit. He refuses to buy a house. He refuses to get married. He refuses to have children. He does just enough to survive and nothing more. Why? Because Han is the victim of the 4-2-1 problem. Due to the one-child policy, Han is an only child. He is solely responsible for his 2 aging parents. And because his parents were also likely only children, he is potentially responsible for his 4 grandparents. 1 young man, 6 elderly dependents. He looks at the math and he realizes the game is rigged. He can never work hard enough to pay for that burden, so he lies flat. And Han is not an anomaly. He is the demographic destiny of the nation. According to a report by TFP, the social engineering of the past has created a catastrophic gender gap. For teenagers aged 15 to 19, there are roughly 115 boys for every 100 girls. That sounds like a dry statistic until you realize what it means biologically. It means that millions of young Chinese men are mathematically guaranteed to never find a wife. They will never start families. They will be the end of their family lines. The report calls this the basic flaw of communism. You can mandate factory output, but you cannot mandate biology. When you treat people like numbers on a spreadsheet, the numbers eventually fight back. By 2050, it is estimated that China will lose 200 million working-age adults. To put that in perspective, that is the entire population of Brazil simply vanishing from the workforce. Now, look at this through a medical lens. A superpower requires a healthy, robust workforce to fight wars and run factories. But China is rapidly becoming a massive nursing home. The healthcare system is already collapsing under the weight of 300 million seniors. Who is going to care for them? In the West, we have immigrants and siblings to share the load. In China, the one-child generation has no siblings. It is a biological time bomb. You cannot be the factory of the world when half your population is in a wheelchair and the other half is busy pushing it. This brings us back to the central comparison, the California paradox. If China is dying, why is California, which also has high costs and aging people, still innovating? The answer is found in the ecosystem. In his book Understanding Silicon Valley, Martin Kenny explains that you cannot build innovation with concrete. You can build a tech park in Beijing, fill it with computers, and order people to invent things, but it won't work. Innovation requires chaos. It requires trust. In Palo Alto on Sand Hill Road, you have a messy collision of venture capitalists, lawyers, dropouts, and immigrants. People fail constantly. They get fired. They start over. But in China, failure is dangerous. If you fail, you lose social credit. If you succeed too much, like Jack Ma, you disappear. Author Malcolm Harris, in his History of Palo Alto, admits that the California system is ruthless. It grinds people down to extract diamonds. It is not a paradise, but he acknowledges that this chaotic efficiency is something an authoritarian state can never copy. China wants the silicon, but they fear the valley. They want the growth, but they fear the freedom that creates it. And that fear is the ceiling. That is why they are stuck. They have built the hardware of a superpower, but they are running the software of a dictatorship, and the software has crashed. To finish this audit, I want to show you one final human example, a tale of two CEOs. We already talked about Jack Ma, the man China destroyed. Now look at Jensen Huang. Jensen Huang was born in Taiwan. He moved to America as a child. He started a company at a Denny's diner in California. Today, that company is Nvidia. In 2024, Nvidia alone became worth more than the entire GDP of most G7 nations. Jensen Huang is loud. He is powerful. He controls the most critical resource on Earth, AI chips. If Jensen Huang had stayed in the East, if he had tried to build Nvidia in Shenzhen instead of Santa Clara, history tells us exactly what would have happened. The moment he became more powerful than the local party secretary, he would have been summoned. His supply chains would have been nationalized. His speech would have been censored. He would have ended up like Jack Ma, quiet, broken, and irrelevant. And that is the California paradox in a nutshell. California is expensive, it has homelessness, it has crime, it is chaotic, but that chaos allows a Jensen Huang to exist. China offers order, it offers high-speed trains and clean streets, but the price of that order is that a Jensen Huang cannot exist. And the math proves which system wins. We started this video with a terrifying number, 1.4 billion people. We end it with a different number, 35. One single Californian generates the economic output of 35 Chinese citizens. That is not a margin of error, that is a rout. As long as the contest is innovation versus replication, the paper tiger will never become the dragon. China will remain a great power, a massive regional factory with a powerful military, but a superpower, a nation that defines the future of humanity, that requires the one thing the Communist Party can never allow: freedom. So the verdict of this audit is clear. China is not going to overtake the West. The math of demographics, debt, and efficiency makes that impossible. The only country that can destroy the American superpower is America itself. We are currently watching the West debate whether we should abandon the very model that makes us win. We are flirting with tariffs, with isolationism, with state control. We are tempted to copy the Chinese model just as it is failing. Are we about to commit the same mistake the Ming Emperor made in 1433? Are we about to burn our own ships? That is the subject of my next investigation, the Blueprint Betrayal, 1900 versus 2025. I'm Mr. Moore and this is The Economy Historian. Drop a comment, I want to know what you think, and if this changed how you see the headlines, subscribe for the reveal. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.